Chapter 11. It was, I knew, incredibly stupid of me to feel as I did after that dinner with Holly and Leia. After all, it had gone very well for me. Perfectly well, in fact. Not only had their suspicions been relieved, they had ended up practically encouraging my little machinations. Hell, they had encouraged me, without having any idea what I was up to. By the time that dinner was over, they had opened up completely to me, given me free rein, unchecked and unhindered. And why? Why did they welcome the wolf into their midst? Why did they succumb to such insanity? Simple. They trusted me. Madness. But that wasn't what made me feel as rotten as I did. What really bothered me was not simply their trust, it was their faith. The two of them looked at me with it shining from their eyes. They looked at me like I knew what I was doing. Madness! On a distant planet, all but lost on the outskirts of the spread of man, a man who is both highly disreputable and a total stranger suddenly appears and crowds you for company. He provides no explanations for his actions and no clues to his motives. He is at best a rogue, at worst a psychotic, and in any case a known powder keg. Yet you not only accept his good intentions, you trust his aim? From this gypsy you expect control. Why? Why, from such as he, do you assume accuracy? From where do you sense this precision? Anyway, the fable. Can no one imagine an incompetent legend? It started off predictably enough. The three of us sat eating and chatting alone in the main dining room. We smiled fiercely at one another while nervously pursuing 100 avenues of small talk and in all ways avoiding until the last minute the point. We talked about the food and how good it was, and we talked about the food we missed, our favorite foods, and our favorite places to eat our favorite foods. We talked about the rotten weather they had had about recently, and about the good weather they had had before that, and about the good weather we hoped we would get in the future. We talked about Sanction, me mentioning that I thought I had met Louis, the owner, if it was the same guy, and they said, oh, yes, it was in fact the owner I had met, and oh, yes, he did drink a great deal, always had. Leia mentioned some gossip she had heard about Louis's having been sent here by a wealthy and influential Earth family who had been embarrassed by the scandal of having what was, face it, an alcoholic son. And we all agreed as to how that made some sense, or it was a good story anyhow. Ha ha. And then Holly told me about the strange thing that happened when they got an uncontrolled mutation once and had to shut down the synthovats completely. Seemed that Louis had simply stopped drinking until the syntho was ready again, refusing to accept their offer of real liquor from the project stores and thereby forcing himself to go over 2 standard months without a drink. And we all agreed that was certainly unusual behavior for an alcoholic. Yes, it certainly was, by golly. And then we sat there staring at one another and still smiling like crazy. Then Holly spoke up at last. Speaking of Sanction, he began, and then talked about what a nice place it was, how Earth-like and so on. Lots of planets like that, Leia added, and then we played the game of naming all the other places that we could think of. How convenient for us, somebody said, and we all laughed. I mentioned something about it bothering me, all those man places, how I thought it was a little spooky, and we all laughed again, ha-ha, stringing it out as long as we could to avoid that damned silence, but still ending up staring and smiling for several seconds until Holly cleared his throat and talked about an interesting item he had read off the fleet beam on that very subject, and I said, "Oh, what was that?" And he said it was very interesting, really, that it seemed there was some sort of religious cult that believed that all these planets had been designed just for us. Oh, really? That is interesting. Yes, isn't it? These people think there is a trail of these planets, and if we follow it to the galactic core, we will find and meet the builders. Meet God himself, I guess they meant. Ha ha ha! How about that? Yes, how about that? Uh-huh. I could see how nervous they were. More, I could see how embarrassed they were. And I could see that they wanted me to start it all off. Had seen that in their eyes from the beginning. And I wanted to. I wanted to lead into it myself so that I would seem more upfront, while at the same time controlling the discussion somewhat. Only, I couldn't think of anything to say. Not a thing. It was inexcusable. What I needed, and quickly, was an extremely plausible and not too elaborate lie or set of lies, and why, for God's sake, didn't I have it ready? Why hadn't I taken the time to think of something instead of wasting my day with two different kinds of idiots, fighting idiots and drinking idiots, the way I had? Damn. I had thought, initially, of trying to get Holly off alone to pull it off. I knew I would have a much easier time with him alone. He would have been even more nervous by himself. He would have been eager to glide past those anxious moments, perfectly willing to buy my non-answers. Anything to avoid turmoil, and damn near anything to keep palling about with the great and exciting and romantic and just a wee bit notorious for spice, Jack Crow. But Liah would have squashed it all if we had left her out. Not that he couldn't have ignored his own doubts without help. It's just that he could never stand up to her actual opposition. If she wasn't satisfied, he couldn't be. Sooner or later, make that simply soon, we would be sitting there again with Holly reluctant to demand more and me reluctant to give it, but both of us having to. By the strength of her will alone, she could force us to both do the one thing we dreaded most. Get to the point. Just what was I up to? It wasn't that she didn't like me. She did. I liked her too. But it was a bigger decision than that. I was an unknown, potentially destructive element in a situation already far too sloppy. And something else. The decision was her decision. For if Holly was their focus, Liah was the couple. I sat there, watching the two of them together, thinking about that, and thinking about how, well, sweet they looked together. He was young and warm and brilliant. She was young and strong and wise. And, of course, lovely. They fit. And all I could think of was the truth that would get me hung. Truth. A real burden against people who fit, especially for someone like me, who hardly fit myself. I had it then. If the truth was all I had, then that was all I could share. So share it I would. Generously. Equitably. I'd give 'em half of it. I cleared my throat. Firmly. They saw the cue, sat up a little straighter, just managed to avoid the impulse to trade a brief glance. Holly, you've been most kind and very patient. Both of you have, I added, with a quick smile for Liah. She responded in mechanical kind without blinking a lash or easing back one bit. But I know you want to know. Just what does someone like me, interstellar pirate, want here? They smiled a little at the pirate part. Not enough. Well, the fact is, Holly, I continued, and then stopped, took an obvious breath, shined what I hoped was a conspiratorial smile, and said, I can't tell you. I saw them, felt them freeze, counted a single beat, then jumped in to thaw them out. Of course I wanted to tell them, and of course there was something in the works, but then I was sure they had suspected that, knowing me as they did. Sigh. I followed that crap with more crap just like it on the principle that lots and lots of nothing can sound like something. And then, on to the obligatory truth part about how I wouldn't want to do anything to damage their situation, and how I didn't expect that I would, but that, also obligatory, I would certainly understand if that was unacceptable to them. I certainly would, and if they wanted me to stay out of their way and move to the city, all they had to do was say the word, and out I'd go. Yes, sir. I had to go through it all again before they had a chance to really consider it. More lots and lots of nothing, while never missing an opportunity to look shy and a little embarrassed by the need for secrecy and, most importantly, intimate. Intimate in the sense of acting like they understood what it was like to be me, since they were so exciting in knowing themselves. Stringing that out, layer upon layer, until the rhythm was right for my secret, personal confession that I really hated to burden them with. It wasn't their problem, after all. Holly jumped to assure me that I could speak freely, snatching at his cue. Laia echoed his assurance, snatching at hers. Only the bolt of lightning, which should have torn through the ceiling of the dome and splattered my lying teeth on the dining room table, but didn't, missed its cue. The other reason I want to stay with you is that, well, I hate this city, Holly. I hate those people. I spend too much of my life with people like that, and with you, it's nice. I'm just so tired of pounding the fools who are always out trying to test themselves against Jack Crow. I gave them a minute to enjoy the compliment and have fun pretending to feel an understanding sorrow before. And I am interested in your work, Holly, and I do want to hear whatever you will take the time to explain to me, though I know there's nothing more boring than trying to explain things to a layman. On the contrary, Jack, he said quickly, Come on, Holly, I said with a wave. You don't have to pretend with me. I know the last thing you want is an audience, knowing damn well he wanted nothing more in the whole wide universe. On the contrary, Jack, he repeated, I'm terribly flattered by your interest. I just hope I won't bore you. Not a chance, Holly. I'm the sponge type. I do think we have a few projects of interest in the works, and, without getting too technical, he began, before becoming too technical almost at once. It didn't matter. I was only half listening. The other half was waiting for Laia. Because it wasn't over until she said it was. So I sweated. Holly had already bought it all, luxuriating in the brotherhood of anything even faintly man-to-man. I had thrown in the part about wanting to stay with them for her, mostly, figuring she would demand, in lieu of facts, something personal at least, before being satisfied. But was she? I could damn near feel her probing gaze, which had strayed not 1 inch from my eyes the whole time. She's not buying it, I thought at last, mustering more sugar cloud to float toward her, when suddenly she relaxed, and I knew I was in. I could turn and look at her then, and smile. She smiled back. It was a sweet smile. A warm smile. An I'm sure you'll do the right thing smile. Madness. But I don't know what I'm doing, I shouted from my mind to hers. How can you stupid bitch? Your faith in me is insane! but her gaze didn't even darken. She had decided, and that was that. I shuddered, passing a hand over my eyes. It was so stupid to feel this way. What was I upset about anyway? Winning, for Christ's sakes? What the hell? Guilt for deceiving her? For being able to? Damn it! Forget it. Go on. Go on! It's a done thing, a completed task. Go on. As regards the armor, I blurted blindly, interrupting Holly in mid-esoterica. Why, yes, he said, surprised. I was just coming to that. You do follow this, don't you? I didn't hit him. I just clamped down and tried to slide into his voice, into the sense of what he was saying. Long, slow, deep breaths. I bolted upright as, out of the blue, I realized what it was he was suggesting. But Holly, the one thing that everybody knows about battle armor is that no one but the owner can wear it. You'd be crushed. Holly smiled, completely unconcerned. Oh, of course I would, Jack, he replied happily. I know that. I'm not planning to wear the suit, not even the helmet. But, Jack, he added, looking excitedly at me and leaning forward across the table eagerly. What if I could use routing feeds to another helmet? I stared at him. Why? I asked. He looked surprised. The record, Jack! The record is there! Then why not just play the coil? Because it's not on the coil, like I've been saying. Oh. Electromagnetic scattering of some time caused it to bleed off. Holly, I still don't understand you, interrupted Laya thankfully. You say it's there, and then you say it's been, bled off? Bled off where? Bled off into the pod itself, dear. It's on the inner surface of the pod shielding plate, but it's still intact. It's still there. She frowned. Then how can you get it off? He smiled indulgently at our inability to keep up with his racing brain. I imagined he had had much practice in his short but brilliant life. But don't you see? That's what makes it such a fascinating problem. To draw it out of such an irregular surface while still maintaining its cohesive interval requires an ability to adjust to millions of split-second alterations of power level. We're talking about a tiny bit of charge here. And the smallest change in resistance factor, an imperfect alloy on the shield plates, a drop of paint, even the fact that the surface is curved can make a difference. You see, if you draw it too quickly, the chain breaks and the electrons lose their cohesion. If you draw it too slowly, then the field halts for the microsecond required for it to produce its own field and bingo, it's gone. You mean you'd lose the record? I prompted. It would go blank? Well, not blank. It would become a regularly interspersed pattern of dots and dashes, which, for our purposes, is the same thing. Just like that? Asked Laya. He nodded. Just like that. Listen, I've seen 6 hours, that's 6 computer hours, mind you, turn static, coalesce, and pop across to a lab assistant's belt buckle. All before the computer, much less us, knew there was a problem. No matter how good your hardware, or how large your storage capacity given current limits, there are still too many bits with too many problems to allow for. I don't get it, I said, and I didn't. Then you're saying it can't be done. No, Jack. I'm saying no computer can do it. Then what can? Asked Laya, sounding as confused as I was. Ollie's face broke into a wide grin. His right index finger stabbed the air. The brain! He said triumphantly. Laya looked at him. I looked at him. She and I looked at each other. That's absurd, she said at last. No man can think as fast as your smallest relays. You told me that yourself. I said process, he replied with a tolerant but firm smile. Not think. Computers don't think. They simply sort. What's the difference? Laya wanted to know. 4 or 5 billion bits of data, for one thing. For the computer, I interjected. No, for the brain, he retorted. We don't focus as well, true enough, and our data priority system is horridly uncontrolled. But whether you call it panicking or going blank or just stuttering, those are generally breakdowns in the delivery system, not the storage. The answer, and about 2 million others per second, is there. So the computers are more effective, Holly, which is the same thing, demanded Laya. Yes, but it is we who do the programming for the effect we want. Computers are, in limited areas, much better devices. But we are vastly superior machines. I took a deep breath. Let me get this straight. You're saying that in order to suck this record out of that pod, it takes a zillion decisions every second, which then require an equivalent zillion alterations in the strength of the pool, right? Right. And you say that no computer is fast enough and big enough at the same time. Right now, none are. Maybe later. They do marvelous things with fluidics these days. I wave that off. Don't confuse me. And the only thing that can make those instantaneous decisions and the like is a human brain. Right again. You see, just hold it a minute, Holly, I blurted, more bluntly than I meant. I still don't get it. You're talking about all this computing being done on an unconscious level. Yes. Laya looked unhappy. But nobody could... How could you direct the focus of your unconscious mind to do this for you? Holly smiled again. It was infuriating. There's the part where the computer can help. It's not so much a matter of concentration in the conventional sense. It's more a matter of frequency. It's just a problem of getting the two brainwave patterns close enough so that they begin to work in harmony, and... He stopped when he saw the shocked look on our faces. But he continued anyway, like a schoolboy trying to get in the rest of his excuse before being punished too severely. You see, if your drawing field, your brainwave in this case, is on a compatible interval pattern, then all those adjustments would be made automatically. I admit there can't be a complete matchup, he added sheepishly. Since no two people have exactly the same frequency, both sides would have to give a little. Give a little? Laya shouted with outrage. You're talking about allowing a machine to alter your brainwave pattern to fit someone else's? Only briefly, he insisted lamely. And not very much. And it wouldn't really fit. I mean, you wouldn't be able to read his thoughts or... My God, Holly, I began. You're insane, Laya finished. It would drive you crazy. There was a pause before we all laughed at the absurdity of her remark. It lowered the tension level somewhat, but the issue, with all of its implied horrors, still hung before us. It might very well, you know, I said seriously. It could cause all sorts of psychological damage. It might simply burn your ego away. Holly sat up straighter in his chair. He looked offended. I believe I have made allowances for such a problem. Special entry and exit procedures, for example. It's madness, muttered Laya bitterly. It's wrong. You're being emotional, Laya, and only because you can't think of any rational objections. All right, Holly, I said, rising to the challenge. Here's one. What if you're him in there? I beg your pardon? What if you became him? At least thought you were, anyway, as long as you were in there. You would be reliving for the first time, and then forgetting afterwards. He regarded me quizzically. Complete submersion? Hardly likely, Jack. The brain is self, after all. You would conflict first. There's still some ouch in that, I pointed out. Yes, but if you consider That's just what you're not doing, Holly Ware! Blurted Leia angrily. She had become quite upset. I saw tears in the corners of her eyes. She was terrified by this. I didn't blame her. When did you come up with this insane notion anyway? He met her gaze without blinking. Just now, he said, in the absolutely unmistakable fashion of one who knows what he is and what he is doing, and who also knows that he, and he alone, is qualified for it. An interesting thing happened then. Leia backed down. It caught me by surprise, left me wondering if, in my own stereotypical haste, I had misjudged the young mad scientist. But then I had it. She was not giving in to his machismo. She was retreating before his expertise. Holly was, after all, the genius. Well, she said, after she had calmed a bit, I don't want to talk about this any more today. I need a little time to get my feet back on the ground, and I shall certainly dream about this tonight. The last came with a tiny, self-deprecating smile, a gesture which made the sculptured lines of her mouth seem even more delicate and frail than before. It was especially endearing, even for her. Holly and I agreed with matching smiles of relief. We all went through the straightening and adjusting needed after too long at the table. We stretched, yawned, grinned. At the door, I turned to shake hands with Holly and found that I was doing it with a man I had not yet met. It was a man who seemed to me to be, at that time, the very best of Holly Ware. His grip was firm, his eyes bright. He looked more confident than I had ever before seen him. And more, he looked excited, hopeful, eagerly intrigued. Leia, despite her own buoyancy having apparently returned, seemed a faded shadow before the warmth of his creative glow. The image of those two, at that moment, struck something in me. It stayed with me, hanging before me as I went through the seal and down the passage to my own suite. I couldn't stop thinking about the way her face had looked, set with gentle firmness, eyes lifted to him, half turned to him, half eclipsed as his moon. And I wouldn't stop thinking about something else, that there was little wonder that such women preferred the Hollies to me. The only time I ever looked that alive, I was probably killing. Damn. The lounge was dark. There was no sign of Cortez anywhere. I thought for a moment that I had stumbled into the wrong suite. Then, I saw the light filtering through underneath the door to my bedroom, and I froze, stock still in my tracks. I could feel her. I wanted a cigarette, but reaching for it seemed a noisy affair. Not loud enough for anyone to hear me from the bedroom. I wasn't worried about that. I didn't want to make, any sound. Absolutely still. Dead still. Rock still. Bolted to the floor and long empty tubes for my arms. Long enough like that and it would all go away, or better. Much better. Better, they would come for me and take me out. Lift me up and away and say everything is all right. Of course you failed, but you were only... I shrugged mightily, violently, forcing my boots to make that horrible, rasping, barely audible shuffle across the carpet as I stepped up to the door and eased it open with my wet hand. Upper lamp on lowest gain, glowing down to white sheets and yellow hair and golden skin. So much gold for so little skin. And all of it, the gentle rising flat tummy, the wide eyes closed or shielded or hidden, the positively dreamlike sweep of lines from throat to forehead and back again to the partial view of more yellow hair, but tufted, promising more hair and more gold. All of it glowing back up into the lamp, shaming it, shaming me. I could feel her. From the doorway, I could feel her. And she was real. Karen was real, had been all along. This other thing, this vague dream, this fantasy, only now half remembered of a ship of my own, without cares or destination or, face it, purpose. This sloppy goal was never as real as the vision of her exquisite promise in my bed. I stumbled out the door, using my wet hand trembling from the plastic door. I sat, then lay on the couch, my tubes and trembling neck. Why didn't I? Why didn't I? A worthless sacrifice. A horrible choice. Even if it was real. Even if it did hurt. Or especially. Or not. I slept, my face feeling sunburnt somehow. Blasted.